Hello, and welcome to the final legislative update for the 2024 session from Child Care Aware of Minnesota. My name is Ann McCully, Executive Director at Child Care Aware, and I will walk you through what transpired at the final hours of the 2024 session on May 20th. First of all, we ended up with these bills. Every one of these bills here, which we'll walk through, does have elements of child care related issues in it. At the end of the day, they combined children and families, early education, licensing, and some things for the Department of Children, Youth, and Families into a single bill, House File 5237. The individual bills you see here below were rolled into what got coined an mega omnibus bill during the last hours of session. And so the tax bill became a vehicle for all of these others, which included higher ed, energy and agriculture, and health and human services. And again, each of those bills have elements that relate to childcare. The Omnibus Jobs and Workforce Development Bill was passed and signed, as was the Omnibus Judiciary Bill. So let's walk through some of the things that were included. First of all, in the House File 5237, which was Children and Families and Education, on the child care appropriations side, three pieces we've been tracking all session made it into the final bill and signed by the governor. One is an $500,000 in one-time fund allocation for Child Development Associate Certificate funding. So this would be funding to either through scholarships or other means help more of our early educators gain a Child Development Associate Certificate. The second was ongoing funding and some additional language and clarification for the Office of the Family Child Care Ombudsperson. And finally, there was some funding allocated for childcare facility grants. There was a switch between a couple of cost centers to allow some additional 1.1 million to be used for childcare facilities in fiscal year 2025. On the education components of that bill, first of all, there was a permission to allocate some underspending in the voluntary pre-K reserve to increase the number of seats for fiscal year 2025, so another 5,200 voluntary pre-K seats. Permission to allow existing funds again for Head Start to be used, another 2% or up to 2% rather, can now be used for program administration. And then some language that I haven't talked a lot about in previous updates that emerged toward the end of session. These are elements, since many of you know, there was an effort to get more money into what will eventually be the Great Start Scholarship Program. That was not funded, but at least some language to help start that process made it through the bill. So first of all, the first couple of these would align more closely then with some of the federal rules coming down for childcare assistance, so allowing for upfront payments as opposed to reimbursement, making these more transferable. And then importantly, the last bullet talks about, or last couple bullets, making sure that there's technology both built and maintained to ensure that these scholarships can happen in the future. And then finally, Department of Children, Youth, and Families, which is the new department that will be beginning in July. A lot of language in the bill, but summing up a couple of things here. One is, of course, to make sure that the funding that has traditionally gone to all of the departments, but in our case for childcare, particularly Department of Education and the Department of Human Services, will continue under the new Department of Children, Youth, and Families, and the creation of an advisory committee that will also help to advise the new department, most notably making sure that the tribal nations are reflected in that advisory committee. Now we're going to get to a few standalone bills that had, in some cases, just a single item. So the first is the higher education bill. And this was an element we've seen throughout the session. Been a main piece of the bill, and that was the Head Start on campus funding. So $500,000 in one-time funding for fiscal year 2025 to address some effort to put more Head Start programs on college campuses. In the agriculture bill, the Farm to School program was expanded and specifically calls out the inclusion of child care centers and family child care homes, as long as those programs are participating in either the National School Lunch Program or the Child and Adult Care Food Program. So another 1.2 million in 2025, and then 1.2 million, a little bit more in future years. In the Jobs and Workforce Development bill, we did see some workforce funding, some additional funding for the Women Venture program. They have been doing work to focus on helping women entrepreneurs start family childcare homes. So another $1 million in one-time funds for them in fiscal year 2025. And the judiciary bill, this went away for a while and came back at the end. This talked about this before. It is language, not funding, but language to basically preclude homeowners associations from stopping if as long as a family child care home can get licensed and meets all the regulations, that there can be no restrictions from a homeowners association on a home offering family child care. So they can't restrict them, and they also can't impose fees or do other things to try to reduce the likelihood of a home being able to be licensed as a family childcare. Finally, the very large list of Office of Inspector General licensing issues that was in two bills. It was in the House File 5237 with the Children and Families pieces, but it was also in the Omnibus HHS bill. And so I've talked about many of these before. I've broken them here into about three buckets. There will be a much more exhaustive list in the written update I will be doing, so watch for that. But basically, it is the beginnings of the new weighted risk system, funding to move that forward. Many small technical changes that add up to some I guess, big changes together, maybe. And that will be, I'm sure the Department of Human Services will be putting these out in very specific ways to the community. So this is just a recap. And then a whole category of changes to our certified license exempt centers. I've characterized this before as really just trying to align what has been traditionally in statute, which hasn't been for very long, uh, with certified centers with other licensed programs. So lots of pieces around definitions, around age groups, around ratios, requiring more record keeping, etc. So strengthening basically what's expected of our certified license exempt centers. That is it. It was a fairly raucous session, as they often are, and not expected to be a big budget year. So given that, we did have some good changes. I am really hoping that you will join us again next year when we are back to cover the 2025 session, and again be watching on our website for a written update, and you can see all back through session, all of the bill trackers as well, if you want to dig in and read a particular bill and how it got to where it is. So thank you again. I've enjoyed doing these updates for you. I hope you've enjoyed listening, and I look forward to seeing you in the future. Have a lovely summer. Bye-bye.